Hi everyone, Tom Loria here. Welcome to the shop. I hope that with the way things are in the world right now that you're all well and taking care of yourselves. And welcome back to episode 3 of Building a Whaleboat. So today's episode we're going to take a look at carving out the hull, the interior of the hull. And we're going to take a look at building a harpoon. There's more to both of these things than a casual observer might see, so let's get in there and start taking a look at these things in detail. Okay, so here we have our carved whaleboat hull. I've got the shape just about where I want it, and it's been sanded and given a coat of shellac as a sealer, and then that's been sanded down with 220 paper. And I've marked a few reference lines. These are station lines, and I've carried them all the way around the hull, and I've maintained the center line for the center of the keel. You really want to try and keep that all the time. Now, next thing we need to do is take the block off of here and put it on here because we're going to be working on the interior today. So I'm going to try and get the screw holes very close to the same location on the bottom as they are on the top. You don't really have to do this, but you know what's going to happen is when I start cutting into this to hollow it out, I want to know where those screws are. So if I just put them randomly anywhere on the bottom, I have no idea when I'm going to hit one with one of my tools. So if I put them even close to the same hole, I'll have a good idea of where I can and where I can't cut away with the gouges and chisels. So there's one hole. And we're going to try and put, we'll try and put that one there. Let's try and center it up though. And we'll put the other one in. So I know my two screws are probably within about a 32nd or a 16th of an inch of there, so I know to stay away from those two areas. All right. So, how do we do this? We just start wasting wood. Time for a little disaster control. When I had turned off the camera before, because I didn't think you needed to see me removing all the material from the boat, I was happily going along, making good progress, as you can see here, when I got a little overzealous, and I went right through the bottom of the boat. Now, that's something I've done from time to time. I don't do it all the time, but I did it this time. And I did it not once where you see it over here, where I've already fixed it, but over here as well. I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but there is a small, probably be about a 1/4 of an inch long, maybe about a 32nd of an inch wide. There's a hole there. You can see it by the pencil mark right there. This is going to happen to you. It happened to me a lot when I first started doing this, and then I got better at avoiding it. Apparently today is not one of the days when the Zen is flowing. So I've got this hole. I'm going to show you how to fix that fairly easily, and it's really stupid simple, kind of like the guy building the boat. Anyhow, here we go. Okay, so the first step in fixing my little faux pas is to put a little piece of tape right there over the offending area. And what that does, or what it will do, is keep the filler that we're going to use from leaking out all over the boat and having to sand it down. What you see here is just the way the filler happened. I did the same thing. I put a piece of tape over this, then filled from the inside, peeled the tape off, and it comes out almost totally flush. I'm going to have to just touch this up just barely. So it works well. So now that we've got that done, I'm going to put this over here in the vise. It's out of the frame for the moment because the next thing is to show you what we've got here to fix it with. Generally, there are two ways you can do this. You can do this with CA glue, cyanoacrylate, super glue, and any of these products, the micro balloons, or this stuff, which is called dense ply. And I have to thank one of my subscribers for turning me on to this stuff. This is a dental product that's used for repairing denture plates. And it works really well. And it mixes with epoxy, it mixes with cyanoacrylate, so it's pretty versatile. The bad thing about this is that it's really expensive. This 1 pound cost me $80. Of course, this is probably a lifetime supply. I'll probably never have to buy it again, but 80 bucks is 80 bucks. Anyway, the next thing is micro balloons. This and this are both micro balloons. This came from a marine supply store, and this came from the hobby shop. You can do either one, doesn't matter. And then for the actual adhesive, I'm choosing this West Systems G5, and it's a 5-minute epoxy, 2-part. And if you don't have West Systems, doesn't matter. You can go get DevCon at the local hardware store. Anything like this will do. So all we're going to do is mix up a small amount of each. Very scientifically measured out. And you don't want to add the microfiller until you've got this stuff nicely mixed. So I've got the dense ply open, so that's what we'll use. A little of that goes in. And as you can see, the more you add the dry ingredient, the tougher this stuff becomes to manipulate, but that's okay. Also, the more of that dry ingredient that's in there, the easier it'll be to sand or in other ways grind or remove it off. So now I'm going to just switch the camera a bit. I'm sure by now you've figured it out. We just drop a little bit in there. Make sure it gets in there well. Now we just let it dry. See you when the boat is feeling better. Okay, so we've made a little bit of progress since you last saw this being carved out, and you also saw me fix a couple of overzealous chisel strokes. That's all fixed. I've put blue magic marker in where it's already thin enough and I have to stay away. That's a good idea for you guys to do that. Just take a pencil or a magic marker or anything and mark the spots where you can actually see light through it. And you can see on the right hand side, that whole section is an area where you can actually see light coming through. So it's really a good idea to start staying away from that area, as well as these areas on the left that I've already marked out. What gouge do you need to get in here? Well, that's going to be determined by the radius. Back here at the ends of the boats, both ends of the boats, you can use something that's flatter, because the outside is flatter. So you want to try and mimic that same shape on the inside. But as you go towards the midship section, you're going to need something with a bit more radius to it. So as you get closer to that area, you might want to switch to something that's got more of a radius, like that, and then go from there. The other thing that you really need to be careful of, and it was the reason, it's usually always the reason why you go through, is you go too close to the place where the grain turns around. In this direction, the grain is running this way, and you can see I'm taking nice shavings off. But as soon as I get right here, the grain turns around and comes from this direction. So you've got to be careful not to do that, because what will happen, and it happens in an instant, is you go to that area and you push just a little further, and then all of a sudden the grain splits and runs out through the bottom of the boat. And that's what happened here. I got too close to that area. The other way that that is most likely to happen, especially with, well, it can happen with a flat chisel or it can happen with a gouge. The actual points, you'll be up here carving and you'll tilt the gouge ever so slightly, and the end will dig in and you won't notice it. That little, I don't know if that's showing up on the camera, it should, but that little dig in right there can cause a world of problems for you. So you've really got to be aware of where the ends of your cutting tool is, whether it's a chisel or a gouge. And the last thing you really need to do, as the boat gets thinner and thinner, as the interior, as you remove more material from the, you're going to need to support, and my hand's going to be in the frame for this, so I apologize, but you really need to support the chisel. Here, I'll try doing it like this. From the outside of the boat, as you put your thumb on the gouge to help guide it along. That'll do a couple of things. It'll support the outside of the boat, and it'll keep you from splitting as you're going along removing material. And the other thing it will do is it'll give you a sense of what you're doing here with this, because you'll feel this on your supporting finger or fingers or palm or whatever you're using. You'll feel it sliding along underneath. So this hand gives a lot of valuable feedback and tells you when you might be heading towards a trouble area. Okay, so I'm going to shut the camera off and I'm going to do some more of this type of thing. You've seen me do it, so you know how it goes now. And for this particular spot, it's right about here. So if I'm thinning over here, I put my thumb right about there, and I put my index finger on the outside, and I let my index finger tell me. It gives me feedback. As the walls get thinner, you're going to feel that blade moving along your finger a lot more. Right now I can barely feel it, which tells me I've got quite a bit of material there to take off. And let's see if I can get a little closer. In a lot of spots I've been getting a beautiful finish right off the chisel. And that's all going to go away when I start carving with these carbide burrs. But Sadly, the necessary evil. So we'll start with the largest burr. And proceed with great caution. Okay, so you can see we've made quite a bit of progress here, and I'm almost at the point where I'm going to stop fussing around with the inside of the boat. This section that you see here is just about where I want it. If you look at this side of the boat, you'll see, now I've coated the inside with some thin down epoxy to sort of seal it up. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to see all the places where I need to address some smoothness issues. Any place where you see this dark in here, and any place where you see light, like say over here, that's all smooth. But any place where you see dark, that's places, those are the low spots on the inside of the hull. Now you have to be careful when you're doing this because this hull is getting really, really thin and it's very easy to break through. So constantly what I do when I'm doing this is I constantly have a strong light source like the one just above my head out of the frame here, and I hold the hull up to the light source and see how much I can see through it. That seems like a pretty unscientific way to go about thinning the hull to a consistent thickness, but it actually works quite well, and it doesn't take long to develop the feel for it. The more light you see, the thinner it is, and the thinnest part of your hull is what you're probably going to have to get the whole hull down to. Not necessarily, because you know, the other thing that you have to understand, and I'm going to start spouting off here, the other thing you have to understand about this is that this particular method of building a boat is something that I certainly didn't come up with on my own, but it's something that I've developed over the years because I do this professionally and there are certain compromises that I make in order to make money on these things. I could spend forever getting this hull down so that everything is a consistent thickness all the way through, but there are practical reasons for not doing that. One of them is, and I've hinted at this in the very first episode, where certain areas of the boat I leave thick on purpose. The ends definitely should be left thick. These are, I would say that they're at least a 1/16 of an inch thick over here. And the reason I can do that and get away with it, and I don't have to get this down so that it looks like the actual stem of the inside of the stem of the real boat, I don't have to do that because nothing happens up here. The only thing that has to happen is that I have to make sure I have the correct amount of clearance to allow the head sheets to sit in here flat and level the way they're supposed to. And once I've done that, there's no need to remove any more material here. Not only that, it makes the ends of the boat nice and strong because there are no ceiling planks and frames up here like there are in the main section of the boat. From here, well, from about here to the end of the boat is going to be supported by frames and ceiling planks, and this section of the hull becomes very stiff, very strong, and surprisingly light. It's well supported. The ends are not supported at all, so if I thin the ends out to the same thickness that I did the midship section of the boat, it could get pretty flimsy and pretty delicate and prone to warping or breaking. So it really behooves one to leave more material in there since there's A, nothing happening, and B, no means of support. So leave it a little thicker. Just thin it down as much as you need to make sure to ensure that you can insert all of your interior details and have them sit correctly. So there you have it. So back to thinning the hull out or making the hull a bit more consistent in its thickness. We're not going to be that concerned with up here and back here. That's the stern, by the way. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate a little bit on thinning all of this out. And again here, that word compromise comes up. And compromise comes in the form of not really needing to absolutely get everything beautifully smooth and consistent like this over here. What you really want to do is you want to give yourself a decent surface in here that A, accurately reflects the outside shape of the boat, and B, gives you a good surface for you to put your frames in that are going to be going up here. If you have a really lumpy surface in here, there's going to be a lot of sections where the frame doesn't make contact with the hull, and that's going to A, make weak spots, and B, it's going to give you an inaccurate, granted a very small inaccuracy in the shape of your interior, but it will be an inaccuracy and a weakness because you won't have that much glue surface. So what we're going to do is, now that we've carved the boat out, I've used a power carver on it a little bit, you know, those carbide bits in a Dremel, and I try and do that as little as possible. But you can see any of these dark spots that you see in here are all spots where that carbide bit went in a little too deeply. And here I'm talking about a little too deeply is maybe a 64th of an inch. So when I say a little, I actually mean a little. So here we go, and what we're going to do, two things that I find very helpful to do this. One is a little piece of bubble wrap. You can use foam, you can use a cloth, you can use anything, but I like the bubble wrap because it easily conforms to the outside of the hull, which means while I'm working in here, this whole section is supported. So that's pretty important when you're working with these really, really thin hulls. The second thing is I made a scraper. Now, I made this pretty much the way I make all my scratch stocks and scrapers. Just grind down the edge to the shape I want, and this is no specific radius, this is a general radius that will allow me to make good contact, I don't know if you can see it, good contact with the curved interior of the hull. And it's got a little wire edge on it that's going to do the cutting. I made it out of a blade that looks like that. So I just took one of these blades, rounded it over, and made sure it had a nice little wire edge on it, a little burr. And that burr is going to do the scraping. So anywhere where I see a light spot and a dark spot, I know that that dark spot is the low part, and I'm going to have to scrape in that area until I see that dark spot goes away. So obviously this is going to make noise, there won't be much talking. I'm sure you're all happy about that. Alright, now right there, that's basically the area I was working on, down close to the bottom of the keel there. And there you see a pencil line, that's where the head sheet goes. So that's my marker for the head sheet. From that point on, I really don't have to remove much material. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to remove any from there. But you can see the light shining through, and to the right of the frame, above the line where the head sheets are, you see there's quite a bit of light, and then down closer to the keel, there's less light. So clearly, I need to remove more material from that area, and I can do it safely because now I know. So there you have it. Okay, let's go back to scraping. Now the extent to which you carry out this evening out of the thickness of the hull is really strictly up to you. If the interior surface of your hull feels smooth enough to give you good contact between the frames and the hull when you install, then you don't really need to go further than that, as long as it represents the interior side of the outside of the hull. In other words, it's fairly consistent in its thickness between here and here. If you've got that, you're pretty much in good shape. Now, there's a line here, and it's about, roughly a quarter of an inch from the top. And this is actually the top of the rail. When I put a rail on here, the rail is going to be sandwiching the hull in. So it's going to be, this is as high as the boat will ever get, except for right up at the bow, where there is a couple of bow chocks in there. This is the only section of the framed part of the hull that you're going to wind up seeing. Everything else is going to be covered by ceiling planks. So this is an area where you will want to spend a little bit of time getting that to look nice, because that will be seen. So you're really going to want to take a little extra care and do this top quarter of an inch nice and smooth, like I've got it over here. This is looking pretty nice, and I don't think I need to pay more attention to this side. This side needs a little work. So you've got the idea of how this goes, and you can keep going with this as much as you like. So there you have it. And I think this is a good place to bring this video to a close. We've covered a lot of ground, and I don't like making these videos too long, and a half hour is plenty of time to sit and watch. So the next video will deal with making harpoons, and that'll be out very soon. So until I see you guys again, or more accurately, until you see me, stay well, stay safe, and get back in the shop.